Our scripture lessons today, Psalm and John, and then there in Samuel, which was shared with our children about the calling of young Samuel. We find the consistent message of how God continues to call out to his children of all ages. He knows our names, and he knows far more than our names. As a matter of fact, as we see there in the psalm, we find David as he prays out, acknowledging that God knows us wherever we are, and even before we speak, he knows the words that are on our tongues, which makes me think there are times when God says, Linda, just close your mouth quickly, if he knows that. But today I'd like for us to just experience and embrace the concept of God knowing. In fact, that concept that there are many things that God only knows. Have you ever heard anybody use that phrase, God only knows, or only God knows? I can think of a context in which, the family dog wanders into the kitchen. You look down at the dog and he's just mudded and matted, and you look down and somebody says, well, where has he been? And we just kind of say, God only knows where he's been. To bring it a little closer to home, some of us may have family members or friends that you've heard this kind of conversation going on, and you get to talking about this person who will go unnamed, and you're talking about it, and you say, well, what are they doing now? And that person says, God only knows, that kind of God only knows. When we use it from a human perspective, it usually means that we have no idea. Who knows? God only knows. But if we use it from a God perspective, and we use it from the perspective of allowing it to bounce off of the character of God, what it should say to us, and at times it says it loudly and sometimes very subtly, is that there is much about life here that God only knows. We sang in the very first hymn, immortal, invisible, God only knows, wise. That aspect of how God not only knows the past and the present and the future and eternity, but God knows us better than we know ourselves. And what does that mean? What does it mean? One thing I'd like to start by saying, it reminds us that God is not limited like we are. There are lots of things that we just quite frankly don't know. There are lots of things about each other that we don't know. Have you ever felt like you had a day when you just want to wear a sign that says, be nice to me, I'm having a yucky day? Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like you just wanted people to know? You didn't want to elaborate, you just want them to know. And we're reminded that much of our experience here is surface, and we base it upon how people look and our initial contact with we know we don't really know. I'm fascinated by a lot of times how on television there's a lot of if I would like to say maybe 90% of the TV shows are based upon surface things, how people look, what people say in the moment. I haven't watched it, but you've probably seen the previews of that, and some of you may be watching it, that show True Beauty. If I understand the premise of that, you have these people and they think they're in a beauty contest, but what they don't know is they're not going to be judged on the basis of their outward appearance. They're going to be judged on the basis of their true beauty. And I hear that and I go, and who is going to judge their true beauty? Really? And how, as those little previews, you see them sniffing at each other and saying these things, and I'm thinking, and you're going to judge the truth. The reality is, isn't it true, friends, that even some of those people that we see as perhaps, being not exactly socially prepared for life, that's a nice way of saying it, isn't it? We use other words like obnoxious and jerks, but I don't use those words. But many times the truth of the matter is, when we experience those people, we don't really know. We don't really know them. We don't know all that they have experienced in life. We do not know their hurts, their wounds. We do not know that. But we respond to what we see. And yet God only knows. And that's true of us as well. But there's a lot, spent on outward appearance. We all know that, don't we? There's also, I heard on BBC and somewhere in England, there's a new opera that's called Skin Deep, and the setting is there, you know, they're in a doctor's situation, you know, cosmetic surgery, they're all that, and they have songs about bandages and Botox and all this, and again, I'm not, you know, casting any stones here, but there is a lot in our society and our culture that makes you want to focus on that surface, the skin deep part of who we are.